Welcome to Shattered Ties, where trust is broken, loyalties are tested, and hidden betrayals come to light. Here, we uncover the darkest sides of family, friendship, and love, stories of deception, greed, revenge, and the quiet pursuit of justice. So sit back, listen closely, and step into a world where every shattered bond leaves a scar. They used Elena's face to sell hope. They called it charity. Then they forged her signature, stole the treatment funds, and blamed her for the missing money. But Elena knew the truth. The children never got help. The donors had been lied to. And when the gala began, she walked in with the tapes they thought were buried. I found out they used my face to steal charity money. Let's begin. The first lie they taught me at Bright Harbor was how to smile while standing beside a child too tired to lift his head. Warm Elena, Myra Vale whispered through her perfect teeth. Donors open their wallets when they feel hope, not grief. So I smiled. I smiled in the lobby beneath a chandelier paid for by people who thought they were buying medicine. I smiled beside cardboard suns painted by children who were no longer there. I smiled for photographers, for trustees, for parents clutching coffee in paper cups like it was the only thing keeping them upright. Bright Harbor was supposed to be a charity for children with rare illnesses. On paper, we funded treatment, emergency housing, and travel grants. In our brochures, we were a lighthouse. In real life, I was the operations director who made the lighthouse run. Invoices, donor reports, hospital partnerships, grant approvals, the ugly machinery behind the mercy. I believed in it because I had to. My mother died waiting for an insurance appeal, and I built my whole adult life around the promise that no family should have to beg the right person to stay alive. That was why Myra hired me. Not because I was charming. Not because I had friends on the board. Because I worked late, read every contract, remembered every parent's name, and could make chaos look organized before the cameras arrived. Myra was the opposite. She floated through Bright Harbor in silk blouses and cruel perfume, kissing cheeks, touching shoulders, crying on cue. People called her a visionary. They never saw her throw a grant request into the trash, because the family was too depressing for the spring campaign. I saw it, I saw all of it. I told myself every organization had rot in the corners. I told myself I could clean it quietly from inside. Then came the Van Alden Gala. The gala was our biggest annual fundraiser, held in a hotel ballroom where the flowers cost more than 3 months of a family's rent. Myra wanted a story for the stage. A single mother, a sick little girl, a last-minute grant, a miracle. I found the family. I approved the money. I watched the transfer leave our account. 3 days later, the mother called me from a motel off the interstate. "Ms. Cross," she said, voice shaking. "The hospital says nothing was paid." I checked the ledger. The money was gone. Not delayed, not misfiled, gone. When I brought it to Myra, she didn't blink. She leaned back in her glass office and looked at me the way rich people look at a cracked plate. "Elena," she said, "you approved the transfer." "Yes, to the hospital." Her smile arrived slowly. "That is not what the system shows." My stomach tightened before I understood why. On her desk, my signature sat at the bottom of a payment authorization I had never signed, sending the funds to a consultancy I had never heard of. Myra folded her hands. "You look pale." That was the moment I realized the charity had not been infected by rot. The rot had hired me to become its skin. But I spent that night inside the finance archive, barefoot because my heels had turned my ankles raw, digging through digital records until the motion lights clicked off around me. The fraudulent transfer was beautiful in the way a knife can be beautiful. Clean routing, correct approval chain, my login, my signature. A timestamp from 11:48 p.m. when I had been asleep in my apartment with my phone dead beside the sink. I pulled access logs. Someone had used a temporary device credential, one issued by it for board presentations. I had never requested it. The request form, naturally, contained my initials. By 2 in the morning, I had 6 screens open, and a feeling in my chest like cold water rising. Bright Harbor's finance director, Paul Rennick, came in at 6:10. He froze when he saw me. "Early," he said. "Late." His eyes moved to the monitor. "You shouldn't be in restricted ledgers without another officer present." I almost laughed. Paul had the moral presence of wet cardboard. He had worked under Myra for 7 years and developed the survival skill of never seeing anything expensive enough to frighten him. "A child's treatment grant disappeared," I said. "You process the reconciliation." His jaw shifted. "I process what's approved." "It wasn't approved by me." He lowered his voice. "Elena, be careful." "Not concerned. Warning. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A calendar invite from Myra. Emergency Compliance Review, 8:00 a.m. mandatory. By 8, the conference room was full. Myra sat at the head of the table with Lowell Price, our board chairman, a man whose suits looked softer than most people's beds. Beside him was Devin Ward, my closest friend at Bright Harbor, our donor relations manager. Devin gave me a tiny, helpless smile. There was also a woman I did not recognize. Gray blazer, no jewelry, eyes like locked doors. "This is Rebecca Sloan," Myra said. "Independent Compliance Counsel." Independent. The word landed like a joke nobody was allowed to laugh at. Rebecca opened a folder. A payment of $48,000 was diverted from a restricted medical grant to a vendor account associated with Ms. Cross. My skin went numb. Associated how? A consulting entity, registered under an address, matching your prior residence. I lived in a 12-unit building. That proves nothing. Lowell sighed, theatrical and disappointed. "Elena, no one wants this to be true." Myra's eyes shone with practiced sorrow. "We trusted you with families at their most vulnerable." I looked at Devin. He stared at the table. "Devin," I said, "you know I wouldn't do this." His throat moved. "I know you've been under pressure." The room tilted. Myra reached across the table and placed one manicured hand over mine. The cameras were not there, but she still performed for ghosts. "We can handle this quietly," she said. "Resign today. Admit to a lapse in judgment. Repay what you can. We won't involve police unless donors demand it." There it was. The door they had built for me, small and low, so I would have to crawl through it. I pulled my hand away. "No." Lowell's disappointment hardened into irritation. Rebecca closed her folder. Devin still would not look at me. Myra leaned close enough for only me to hear. "Then we do it publicly." And because I was still naive in one final place, I thought public meant a statement. I did not yet understand that they had prepared a funeral for my name. By lunch, every staff member knew I had been suspended. Not officially. Officially, Bright Harbor had initiated a confidential review. Unofficially, people stopped speaking when I entered the kitchenette. A receptionist who used to send me pictures of her dog pulled her coffee mug away from mine. 2 grant coordinators cried in the restroom and went silent when I opened the door. The building itself changed shape around accusation. Hallways narrowed. Glass walls became mirrors. Even the children's drawings on the bulletin board seemed to stare. Devin found me in the stairwell. He looked like he had slept inside his suit. His tie was crooked, his eyes red. For 1 second, I saw my friend again. The man who brought soup when I had the flu, who knew how I took my tea, who once told me Bright Harbor survived because I did the work Myra took credit for. "I'm sorry," he said. I folded my arms. "For what part?" He flinched. "You don't understand what's happening." "Then explain it." He looked up the stairs, down the stairs, then lowered his voice. "Myra has emails, access logs, vendor records. If you fight, they'll bury you. They fabricated it. I know what you think." "What I think?" "Elena," his face tightened with panic. "Please take the quiet exit. You can rebuild somewhere else." I stared at him until his eyes broke away. "What did they give you?" I asked. His mouth opened, closed. There it was, not guilt, calculation. "Promotion," I said. "Salary, seat closer to Myra." His voice cracked. "My mother's care home doubled their rates. I was drowning." For a moment, pity tried to enter me. Then I remembered the mother in the motel, whispering that the hospital had not been paid. "So you sold me." He stepped closer. "I delayed a report, that's all. I didn't know they were going this far. People always say that after handing someone the first shovel." "What report?" Devin rubbed both hands over his face. "The donor complaint from Van Alden's office. They asked why the grant was paid to a shell vendor. I routed it to Myra before you saw it." The stairwell light hummed above us. "How long?" I asked. "What? How long have you been routing things away from me?" He said nothing. My heart did not break loudly. It simply stepped backward from him and locked the door. Before I could speak, my phone lit up. Unknown number, then another, then 10. Messages poured in so quickly the screen stuttered. "Thief, how could you steal from sick kids? Hope you rot." My suspension was no longer confidential. Someone had leaked my name to a local news blog with a headline engineered for blood. "Charity director, accused of SIPHONING children's medical funds." The article quoted an anonymous board source and included a photograph from last year's gala. Me smiling beside a little boy in a knit cap. Myra had chosen the picture well. It made me look warm enough to hate. Devin saw the headline over my shoulder. His face went gray. I didn't know, he whispered. This time I did laugh. It came out small and ugly. You knew enough. I walked past him, down the stairs, through the lobby, past the donor wall engraved with names of people who believed generosity could be protected by marble. Security was waiting at the front desk. The guard could not look me in the eye as he asked for my badge. When the doors closed behind me, my phone kept vibrating like a living thing trapped in my hand. Across the street, on the 4th floor, Myra stood at her office window. She did not wave. She only watched to make sure I understood I had been removed from my own life. The first person who believed me was the woman whose money had vanished. Her name was June Calloway. Her daughter Lily was 6 years old and had the kind of eyes that made adults lower their voices. I found June at the motel after 3 buses and 1 hour of standing outside because I was afraid she might slam the door in my face. She opened it wearing the same sweatshirt from the gala. Only now there was a coffee stain down the front and a hospital wristband around her wrist. For 3 seconds, she looked at me like I was the villain from a story she had not wanted to be in. I didn't steal it, I said. Her hand tightened on the door. I know, she said. I almost sat down on the walkway. She let me in. Lily was asleep on the bed, one small hand curled around a plastic dinosaur. The room smelled like disinfectant, noodles, and fear. June pulled a folder from under the mattress. After your charity said the payment went through, the hospital billing office called me. They said the account number on the confirmation didn't match them. I called Bright Harbor. A man told me not to contact you. What man? Devin Ward. The name still hurt, which made me hate myself. June handed me a printed email. Devin had written that my department was under review and all communication should go through executive leadership. Below it, Myra had added a note. Please reassure Ms. Calloway that Bright Harbor is doing everything possible despite Ms. Cross's irregularities. Irregularities, such a clean word for a blade. I started recording calls after that, June said. I looked up. She tapped her phone. My sister's a paralegal. She said people lie less when they don't know you're saving their lives. For the first time in 2 days, the room stopped spinning. June played the recordings. Paul Rennick telling her the payment issue was tied to my personal misuse of vendor channels. Myra promising a replacement grant if June signed a non-disparagement agreement. Devin saying, very softly, that I had been unstable for months. Unstable. Another word chosen before I knew there was a script. June watched me listen. Are there other families? I did not answer fast enough. Her mouth tightened. How many? I don't know. But you suspect. I thought of denied grants, missing follow-ups, vendors I had never met, consultancy invoices approved during board retreats, families whose gratitude had been photographed, but whose bills I had never seen marked closed. Yes, I said, I suspect. June looked at Lily. Then don't clear your name. I frowned. Clear theirs, she said. All the families they used. That sentence changed everything. Until then, I had been thinking like an accused person. Prove I did not do it, survive, breathe. June forced me to think like someone standing inside a burning building with locked rooms behind every wall. She gave me copies of the recordings. I gave her the last cash in my wallet for another night at the motel. She refused twice, then took it because pride is a luxury terror burns first. At the door, she caught my sleeve. They picked you because you cared, she said. People like that always think care makes you weak. Outside, the evening had turned blue and cold. My phone was almost dead. My name was being carved open on the internet by strangers who had never met me and would forget me by morning. But in my pocket were the first 3 pieces of proof. Not enough for justice. Enough for a hunt. I learned quickly that public disgrace gives you one strange gift. People stop pretending in front of you. Vendors ignored my emails. Former colleagues blocked my number. Donors sent threats written in the polished language of people who believed cruelty sounded better with punctuation. But the invisible people answered. Night janitors. Former interns. A fired bookkeeper named Annika who agreed to meet me behind a closed bakery at 6:00 a.m. because, in her words, Myra Vale can smell fear through drywall. Annika had worked finance before Paul. She was small, sharp-eyed, and smoked like each cigarette owed her money. They didn't start with medical grants, she said, handing me a flash drive wrapped in a napkin. They started with events. I plugged it into an old laptop in my car. Spreadsheets opened one after another. Floral contracts inflated by 300%. Catering invoices routed through companies registered to Lowell Price's nephew. Transportation funds paid to a luxury car service that had never driven a patient anywhere. Why didn't you report it? I asked. Annika blew smoke toward the alley. I did. What happened? Myra cried. Lowell thanked me for my courage. Paul said I misunderstood restricted and unrestricted funds. 2 weeks later, HR found liquor in my desk. Was it? I'm a recovering alcoholic, she said. 3 years sober at the time. The cruelty of it made my hands go cold. Annika tapped the laptop screen. Look at the vendor names. They were almost childish once you knew where to stare. Harbor Strategy, Bright Path Consulting, Lighthouse Outcomes, Mercy Bridge Advisors, every name built from our own brochures. I traced registrations through public databases, archived pages, old fundraising reports. By noon, a pattern emerged. The shell companies shared mailing addresses with law firms connected to board members. Payments spiked before galas, after major donor pledges, and whenever a family story went viral. Bright Harbor had become a machine. Find suffering, photograph it, raise money, skim the top, delay the aid, blame administrative complexity, repeat. And now, when one transfer got noticed too quickly, they had thrown me into the gears. Annika gave me one more thing before she left. A name. Ask about Room 12. At Bright Harbor. At St. Ormond Children's Ward. Bright Harbor used to sponsor it. Then one day, all the paperwork changed. What happened in Room 12? She looked down the alley, as if the answer might be listening. A boy died waiting for a treatment grant everyone thought had been paid. The name was handwritten on the back of a receipt. Caleb Morse. I searched him in the car, 9 years old. Bone marrow disorder. Bright Harbor campaign video titled Help Caleb Come Home. The thumbnail showed Myra kneeling beside his wheelchair, her forehead pressed to his as if receiving a blessing. The video had raised $312,000. Caleb had died 6 weeks later. The official memorial post said complications. The comments said Angel. The ledger said Mercy Bridge Advisors had received $89,002 days after the campaign closed. I sat in the parking lot until my eyes burned. Not because I was sad, though I was, because I finally understood the size of the thing wearing a halo. Myra had not stolen from dying children once. She had built a business model around making them useful before they disappeared. Caleb Morse's father lived above a hardware store in a town where every window seemed to have a flag, a plant, or a silence in it. His name was Aaron. He answered the door holding a wrench and looked at me as if he had been expecting bad news for years. When I introduced myself, he said, "The thief." "Yes," I replied. "That's what they're calling me." He almost shut the door. Then he saw whatever was left of me and stepped aside. His apartment was neat in the way grief can make a home into a museum. Caleb's shoes still sat by the radiator. A blue backpack hung from a chair. On the wall were photos of a boy with a grin too large for his thin face. "I don't give interviews," Aaron said. "I'm not a reporter." "Then what are you?" I looked at Caleb's photo. "Late." That answer got me a chair. I told him what I knew. Not enough. Never enough. He listened without moving except for one vein jumping in his temple. When I said Mercy Bridge Advisors, he stood up and walked into the kitchen. For a terrible second, I thought he was going to be sick. Instead, he returned with a cardboard box. "My wife kept everything," he said, before she left. The box contained hospital bills, emails, printouts, handwritten notes, a Bright Harbor campaign schedule, and a thank you card from Myra written in silver ink. Aaron pulled out an envelope. This came after Caleb died. Inside was a check for $5,000 labeled bereavement support. "They raised over $300,000, I said. His laugh was so empty it frightened me. "We got 5. "Did you ask about the rest?" "For months. They said restricted funds had compliance requirements. Then they said Caleb's condition no longer qualified after he passed. Then Lowell Price called me personally. My pen stopped. What did he say?" Aaron's face changed. Not grief now. Humiliation preserved in amber. He said, if I kept attacking the charity, people would think I was trying to profit from my son's death. The apartment seemed to shrink around us. Aaron reached deeper into the box and removed a small black device. My wife recorded that call. She wanted to sue. I wanted to bury our boy in peace. We fought so much the house couldn't hold us anymore. He pressed play. Lowell's voice filled the room, warm and poisonous. He never threatened. That was the genius of men like him. He expressed concern. He mentioned reputation. He wondered aloud how donors would feel if a grieving father appeared ungrateful. He said Myra was devastated. He said Caleb's story had helped so many other families. Helped, the word made my vision flash white. Aaron turned it off before the end. Can you use it? Yes. Will it matter? I wanted to say yes with the confidence people deserve after suffering. Instead, I told the truth. Only if I find the money and the pattern. He nodded, then find it. At the door, he gave me Caleb's campaign folder. There's a donor list in there. One woman called after the funeral. She sounded scared, said she'd seen something at the gala. My wife wrote her name down. The name was Margaret Ellery. I knew it immediately. She was not just a donor. She was Lowell Price's ex-wife. And if the look on Erin's face meant anything, she had been waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. The police called on a Tuesday morning. Detective Harlan asked me to come in voluntarily. People say voluntarily when they want you to feel the handcuffs before they use them. I brought no lawyer because I could not afford one. That was my first mistake. My second was assuming the truth would sound different from a lie if I said it calmly enough. Detective Harlan was not cruel. That almost made it worse. He had the tired face of a man who had seen too many guilty people act offended. We have statements from Bright Harbor leadership, he said. Financial records, device logs, a witness who says you asked about vendor routing before the transfer. A witness. He slid a page across the table. Devin Ward. The statement was measured, reluctant, devastating. Devin claimed I had been anxious about debt, that I resented Myra, that I once joked donors would never notice where the money went, that, on the night of the transfer, he saw me return to the office after hours. Every lie wore a small piece of truth like stolen clothing. I had been anxious. I did resent Myra. I had made a bitter joke about donors once, after a board member spent restricted funds on a champagne reception. I had returned to the office after hours many times. Just not that night. Harlan watched me read. Anything you want to clarify? My friend is lying. Why would he do that? I looked at the statement again. Devin's signature sat at the bottom, neat and careful. Because someone made lying cheaper than telling the truth. The interview lasted 2 hours. I gave them June's recordings, Erin's call, Margaret's photographs. Harlan listened, but I saw the problem in his eyes. I had smoke. Bright Harbor had paperwork. Paperwork wins until fire reaches it. When I left the station, Devin was waiting across the street. I almost walked past him. He stepped into my path. I had to, he said. The simplicity of it stunned me. No, I said, you chose to. His eyes were wet. Myra had emails, not just about me, about my mother's Medicaid forms. Some things I signed, I could go to prison. So you pointed them at me instead. She said you'd get probation if you cooperated. I stared at him. You discussed my prison sentence with her. He looked like I had slapped him. That was the thing about cowards. They could injure you and still feel wounded by your reaction. I'm trying to fix it, he whispered. Then tell the police the truth. I can't yet. Then you are not fixing anything. You are waiting to see who wins. His face collapsed because I had named him accurately. Before he could speak, a black car pulled to the curb. Myra sat in the back seat, window lowered just enough for me to see her smile. Devin, she called softly. He turned like a dog hearing its leash. Myra looked at me. You should rest, Elena. Stress makes people look unstable. There was that word again. Unstable. They were not just building a theft case. They were building a character for me. Bitter, desperate, erratic, vindictive. A woman whose evidence could be dismissed as obsession. I smiled back. Myra's expression flickered. She expected tears, rage, pleading. I gave her nothing. Thank you, I said. Her eyes narrowed. For what? For saying it in front of him. I tapped my coat pocket. Devin went pale. Myra's window slid up. I had not recorded her, not that time. But for the first time, she thought I had. Fear, I discovered, was most useful before it knew whether it was justified. But the Winter Mercy Gala looked like heaven rented by the hour. White roses climbed gold pillars. A children's choir hummed near the stage. Servers carried crystal glasses through a room full of people whose compassion had valet parking. Every face turned when I entered. It was a quiet turn, the elegant kind. No gasps, no pointing, just a ripple of recognition followed by moral distance, as if theft might be contagious. Myra saw me from across the ballroom and smiled. She wore midnight blue and diamonds shaped like tears. Of course she did. Lowell approached first, because men like him always send their shadow before the storm. Elena, he said warmly, this is not wise. I was invited. Myra is sentimental. And you? I'm practical. His smile never moved. Leave before this becomes another unfortunate episode. Another, the word did its work. Anyone listening would hear concern for my mental state. I raised my voice slightly. Are you threatening me, Lowell? 2 donors glanced over. His smile tightened. I'm protecting the children from spectacle. No, I said. You've always been excellent at turning children into spectacle. For 1 second, his eyes went flat and animal. Then Myra appeared, touching his arm. Elena, I'm so glad you came. She kissed the air beside my cheek. Her perfume made my stomach remember the conference room. I hope tonight brings healing, she murmured. I brought something better. Her fingers tightened on my elbow. To everyone else, it looked affectionate. You are surrounded by people who believe me, she whispered. And you are surrounded by microphones. She released me. The program began at 7. Myra took the stage under warm light, and the room softened before she opened her mouth. That was her gift. She made audiences feel kind for watching her. Tonight, she said, voice trembling, we gather not only to raise funds but to restore trust. A screen behind her showed smiling children, some living, some dead. Caleb's face appeared for 3 seconds. Aaron, seated near the back with June, closed his eyes. Myra continued. Recent events have wounded our community. We discovered betrayal inside our own walls. And while legal processes must unfold, I want to say this clearly. One person's actions will never define Bright Harbor. Applause rose, gentle and obedient. Then Devon stepped onto the stage. I had not expected that. He looked pale under the lights. Myra placed a hand on his shoulder like a priest blessing a sinner. Devon Ward, she said, has shown extraordinary courage during this painful time. Courage! He took the microphone. His eyes found mine in the crowd. For a heartbeat, I thought he might finally break the script. I loved this organization, he began. Past tense. Myra's hand slid from his shoulder. I loved what I thought it was. The ballroom changed temperature. Lowell stood. Devon swallowed. And I lied for people who used sick children as inventory. Myra moved first, cut his mic, but the mic did not cut. Because Mr. Alvarez's nephew had control of the booth, and because Devon, coward that he was, had finally realized the only safe place left was the truth shouted too publicly to kill. Devon's hands shook so badly, the microphone caught the sound. I signed a false statement against Elena Cross, he said. I delayed donor complaints. I gave Myra access to Elena's badge. I told myself I was protecting my mother, my job, my future. But the truth is uglier. I liked being chosen by powerful people. The room was silent, except for the faint clatter of a dropped fork. Myra walked toward the podium. Devon is unwell. There it was again, their favorite cage. Devon flinched, but he did not stop. I have the device request used to fake Elena's login. The screen behind him changed. Not to the next planned campaign video. To a scan of an internal IT form authorizing a temporary credential under my name. Requested by Devon Ward. Approved by Myra Vale. Security override by Paul Rennick. A murmur rolled through the ballroom. Myra turned toward the AV booth, face still arranged but eyes burning. Lowell began moving toward the exit. Margaret stood in his path. Leaving early, she asked, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. I stepped forward, heart hammering so hard my ribs hurt. My name is Elena Cross, I said, and my voice filled the ballroom from speakers I had not realized were live. For weeks, Bright Harbor has told you I stole medical funds. Tonight you're going to see what your money actually paid for. The screen changed again. June's recording played first. Myra promising a replacement grant if a desperate mother signed silence. Paul blaming my irregularities. Devon calling me unstable. Then Aaron's recording. Lowell's velvet threat after Caleb's death. Faces around the room shifted from shock to discomfort to self-protection. That middle stage mattered. Shock is passive. Discomfort asks whether you should have known. The screen showed ledgers next. Shell companies, board connections, inflated invoices, campaign totals versus family payments. Caleb's $312,000 beside the $5,000 bereavement check. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh my God." Myra grabbed a handheld microphone from a stunned MC. This is a coordinated attack by a disgruntled former employee, she said. These materials are stolen, manipulated, and deeply harmful to families who deserve privacy. A brilliant response. She wrapped herself in the children again. Then June stood. My daughter deserved treatment, she said. Her voice was not amplified, but rage carried it. You used her face while the hospital called me for money. Another mother stood. My son too. Then another. You made us sign papers. A father near the back lifted a photograph. You raised money after she died. The room broke into fragments. Reporters rushed forward. Donors demanded answers from board members who suddenly looked elderly. A trustee tried to leave and found 2 journalists already filming him. Lowell leaned toward Margit, smile gone. You vindictive bitch. Margit's expression did not change. Yes, finally. Myra climbed back onto the stage, as if height could restore authority. You are being manipulated, she cried. The screen behind her went black. For 1 second, she looked relieved. Then the final video began. It was from a service hallway at the Van Alden Gala. Time-stamped. Myra Lowell Paul Devon, my badge in Devon's hand. Myra's voice clear enough to slice bone. Once Lily's grant bounces, Elena becomes the story. Make her look desperate, not clever. The ballroom stopped breathing. On screen, Lowell said, and if she fights? Myra smiled in the video. Then we make everyone wonder if she's sane. In the real ballroom, Myra dropped the microphone. 3 weeks after the gala, Bright Harbor's interim legal team offered me a settlement. The meeting took place in a conference room that smelled like lemon polish and surrender. Their lawyer, a woman with kind eyes trained to do unkind work, slid the offer across the table. $700,000. A public statement acknowledging procedural mistakes. No admission of intentional wrongdoing against me. A confidentiality clause broad enough to bury my voice, beside Caleb's medical bills. My lawyer, provided pro bono after the gala made me temporarily useful to justice, said nothing. She had told me beforehand that silence in negotiations can be a weapon. I read the number again. $700,000 could pay my debts, replace my savings, get me out of the apartment where reporters still buzzed the intercom. It could buy therapy, safety, sleep. It could make the last month mean something other than damage. The lawyer across from me folded her hands. Ms. Cross, this allows everyone to move forward. Everyone. There are words that reveal the crime, hidden inside politeness. Who is everyone? I asked. She blinked. The affected parties. June Calloway. The foundation has created a relief process for families. Aaron Morse. Historical claims are complex. Annika Patel. Employment matters would be separate. So everyone means me, and the people who want me quiet. My lawyer's mouth twitched. The other lawyer leaned forward. You have been through a terrible ordeal. No one disputes that, but extended public conflict may harm the very families you care about by reducing donor confidence. There it was, the charity's corpse still trying to use children as a shield. I pushed the paper back. No. My lawyer turned slightly. Elena, we can counter. No confidentiality. The Bright Harbor lawyer's kindness thinned. That will significantly reduce the offer. Good, then the number will match their remorse. The meeting ended badly, which was the first honest thing to happen in that room. Outside, my lawyer exhaled. You understand what you refused? Yes. Do you? I looked at the city moving around us, everyone rushing somewhere, unaware that a person can stand on a sidewalk and feel the entire architecture of her future change. I understand they're still trying to purchase the one thing they failed to steal. Your reputation. My mouths. She smiled then. All right, then we make them pay for leaving it open. The next week, we filed civil claims. Defamation, wrongful termination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, retaliation, fraudulent misrepresentation. We coordinated with families filing their own suits and with prosecutors building criminal cases. The headlines returned. So did the hate. Not everyone believed the evidence. Some said I had orchestrated the gala for attention. Some said June looked coached. Some said Caleb's father was exploiting tragedy. Some said Myra was too beautiful to be guilty, which told me everything I needed to know about humanity's weakest defenses. At night, I read comments until my hands shook, then forced myself to stop. One message arrived from an unknown account. You should have taken the money. Attached was a photo of my apartment building. For the first time since the gala, I felt the old fear return, not sharp but intimate, the kind that knows your address. I forwarded it to Harlan. Then I packed a bag and went to June's motel, where 3 families were sharing pizza on the floor, and Lily had taped a paper sun to the window. June opened the door and took one look at my face. They found you, she asked. Yes. She stepped aside. Then they find all of us. That was how I learned survival could be collective. Not softer, stronger. Myra Vale came to court in white. Not cream, not ivory. White. A dress tailored to innocence, a coat draped over her shoulders like a borrowed wing. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was soft. She looked less like a defendant than a widow attending the funeral of her own reputation. The photographers loved it. So did she. Preliminary hearings are not supposed to feel theatrical, but Myra made every doorway a stage. She paused before entering. She held her mother's hand. She whispered to a child from one of her legitimate early campaigns, a boy now healthy enough to look confused by the cameras. I watched from the other side of the hall and felt my stomach twist. "She's still doing it," June said beside me. "Yes. Does it ever stop working?" I looked at the reporters lifting cameras. Not soon enough. Inside, prosecutors laid out the framework. Shell companies, false statements, diverted restricted funds, witness intimidation, evidence destruction. Lowell's lawyers objected with expensive boredom. Paul looked like a man already negotiating. Devon sat behind the prosecution table, smaller than I remembered. Then Myra's attorney stood. He was very good, that was the worst part. He did not deny everything. He sympathized. He separated. He suggested administrative failures, rogue financial actors, grief exploited by sensational media. He painted Myra as a visionary betrayed by subordinates she trusted too much. Subordinates. That meant Paul, Devon, me if needed. Myra lowered her eyes at perfect intervals. Then the prosecutor played the hallway video. Make her look desperate, not clever. The courtroom air changed. Myra's attorney argued context. The judge watched the video again. Lowell's jaw clenched hard enough to show the skull beneath the skin. When Myra was asked to surrender her passport, she looked genuinely offended. Not frightened. Offended. As if consequences were vulgar things happening too close to her body. Afterward, in the hallway, she found a way to pass near me. "Elena," she said softly. My lawyer moved, but I lifted a hand. Myra's eyes were wet. Cameras were close enough to catch tears, not sound. "I hope destroying me heals you," she whispered. There it was, the final refuge of abusers. They turn accountability into your cruelty. I stepped closer and matched her softness. "You destroyed children for applause. I'm just reading the receipts." Her face flickered, only for a second, but a photographer caught it. By evening, the image was everywhere. Myra's mask slipping, my expression unreadable. The internet, hungry as ever, changed sides with humiliating speed. People who had called me a monster now called me a queen. They made edits. They used dramatic music. They commented mother under clips of June confronting Myra, as if real pain were a character arc designed for them. I hated that almost as much as being hated. But attention had uses. Donations began flowing, not to Bright Harbor, now frozen, but to a temporary medical relief fund overseen by the court and hospital partners. Lily's treatment was scheduled. Other families received emergency payments. Aaron called me after the first disbursement. "Caleb's money helped someone," he said. His voice broke on helped. I sat on the floor of June's motel bathroom, because it was the only private place, and cried without making sound. Justice had not resurrected anyone. It had only stopped the theft from continuing. Some days, that felt like victory. Some days, it felt like arriving after the house burned down with a bucket of clean water. The first public hearing for the Victim Restitution Fund was held in a civic auditorium with bad lighting and no glamour. That made it holier than any Bright Harbor gala. Families filled the rows holding folders, photographs, oxygen tanks, snacks, children, grief. No white roses. No champagne. No donor wall. Just people who had learned the hard way that charity without accountability can become another form of hunger. I was asked to speak first. I had prepared remarks. Clean ones, legal ones, words like oversight, harm, transparency, recovery. They sat in my hand, printed and useless. When I reached the microphone, I looked at June. Lily sat beside her wearing a yellow hat, cheeks fuller than when I first saw her in the motel. I looked at Aaron holding Caleb's blue backpack on his lap. I looked at Annika, sober and furious, ready to testify about the liquor planted in her desk. I folded the speech. "My name is Elena Cross," I said. "I am not here because I was framed. I'm here because being framed was the only reason I finally saw the whole machine." The room went still. I thought doing good work inside a corrupt structure would protect people. It didn't. It protected the structure. Every time I fixed a crisis quietly, I helped Bright Harbor look functional enough to keep stealing. I need to say that because apology without responsibility is just another performance. My voice shook, I let it. "I am sorry." No one applauded, thank God. Then June spoke. She did not use legal language. She told them about motel ice machines, hospital billing calls, signing forms while Lily slept because she was afraid help would disappear if she asked too many questions. "They made me feel difficult for wanting the money they raised with my child's face," she said. "I want every parent here to hear me. You were not difficult. They were counting on you being tired." A sound moved through the room. Not applause, recognition. Aaron spoke next. He placed Caleb's backpack on the table before him. My son became a campaign, he said. Then a line item, then a complication. I don't want anyone here to call him an angel today. He was a boy. He liked dinosaurs, hated peas, cheated at Uno, and wanted to be tall enough for the big slide. Don't make dead children decorative. That's how people like Myra start. By the time he finished, even the court clerk was crying. Family after family took the microphone. Some voices were angry, some were flat, some broke apart. Together, they did what no Gala video ever had. They made suffering impossible to consume prettily. Reporters covered it, but differently this time. Less spectacle, more names, more documents, more questions about charity oversight, restricted funds, board accountability, donor complicity. That mattered, not because journalism saved us. Nothing single saved us, but pressure spread. Hospitals reviewed partnerships. State regulators expanded audits. 2 other charities quietly removed board members tied to Lowell's network. The machine had more rooms than Bright Harbor. We had opened one door. After the hearing, Devin approached me outside. He looked thinner, older, almost transparent. My mother's care home dropped me, he said. I'm sorry for her. He nodded, accepting the boundary like a sentence. I'm testifying next week. Tell the truth. All of it. I looked at him then, really looked. All of it is the only part that matters. He walked away without asking forgiveness. That, more than any apology, made me think he might someday become human again. The trial lasted 11 days. Myra cried on 3 of them. Lowell never cried. He took notes. He corrected dates. He whispered to lawyers. He looked offended by evidence, as if facts were employees performing poorly. Paul pled before trial and testified with the damp desperation of a man trying to trade details for years. Devin testified too. He told the truth badly at first, then better as the prosecutor forced him through every lie he had told about me. When he described handing over my badge, he looked at the jury and said, I knew enough to stop. I didn't. That was the only sentence from him I respected. The prosecution played recordings, showed ledgers, mapped shell companies, displayed campaign videos beside unpaid bills. Myra's attorney tried to isolate each piece, but fraud is like mold. One spot can be explained, a wall of it cannot. I testified on day 7. Myra watched me the entire time. The defense asked whether I resented her. I said yes. The courtroom stirred. Her attorney leaned in, sensing blood. So your testimony is influenced by anger. My testimony is influenced by documents, I said. My anger is influenced by your client. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. He asked whether I had benefited from public attention. I said no amount of attention returns privacy. Once strangers have called you a thief for stealing from dying children. He asked if I considered myself a hero. I looked at the jury. No, heroes arrive earlier. That line spread online later. People put it over music. I wished they had left it in the room where I meant it. On the final day, Myra took the stand against advice. Of course she did. A woman that addicted to performance cannot resist a captive audience. She spoke beautifully. She talked about pressure, growth, imperfect systems, misogyny, betrayal by male colleagues, the burden of being the face of hope. Some of it almost sounded true because manipulation often borrows from real wounds. Then the prosecutor asked one question. Ms. Vale, when you said, make her look desperate, not clever, who were you referring to? Myra inhaled. For the first time since I had known her, no answer came ready. The silence convicted her before the jury did. Verdicts: guilty on fraud conspiracy, wire fraud, obstruction, witness tampering. Lowell guilty on conspiracy, fraud, money laundering. Paul guilty by plea. Devin received leniency for cooperation but not immunity. People hugged, reporters ran. June sobbed into Lily's hat. Aaron closed his eyes and whispered something to Caleb. I felt almost nothing. That frightened me. Later, my lawyer found me sitting alone on the courthouse steps. It's over, she said gently. No, I replied, it's decided. She sat beside me. The difference mattered. A verdict can name what happened. It cannot unmake it. It cannot return months of terror, years of stolen funds, children's time, parents' trust, my old belief that good intentions were enough. Sentencing would come later. Civil cases would continue. Restitution would be fought over by lawyers billing by the hour. Some families would get money, some would get apologies, some would get neither. Myra was led out without looking at me. Lowell did look. Not with regret, with hatred. That was fine. Regret would have asked something of me. Hatred simply confirmed I had finally become inconvenient. But 1 year after the gala, Bright Harbor's building reopened under a new name. Not mine, I refused. The families chose Harbor Witness Fund because June said help without witness becomes charity theater. The board seats were public. The ledgers were public. Restricted funds could be tracked by donors and families in real time. Administrative salaries were capped. Every campaign required written family consent, plain language agreements, and independent hospital verification. It was not perfect. Perfect is a word predators love because it makes honest repair look inadequate. It was accountable, that was better. I did not become CEO. People expected me to. The internet wanted the clean ending. Framed woman takes over corrupt charity, justice blooms, music swells. No, I became director of compliance and family advocacy with veto power over campaigns and a salary posted on the website. I worked 4 days a week because trauma turns 5 into a battlefield. I saw a therapist on Fridays. I stopped reading comment sections. Mostly. June joined the family advisory board. Lily finished treatment and developed a tyrannical interest in knock-knock jokes. Aaron created a grant category in Caleb's name for emergency lodging, not because it healed him, but because motel rooms should not be the place parents learn institutions lied. Annika became finance director. On her first day, she placed a bottle of sparkling cider on her desk with a sticky note. Still sober, still watching. Margaret donated enough to fund the public ledger system, then insisted her name be listed in the smallest permitted font. Devin moved away after sentencing. He wrote one letter. I did not open it for 3 weeks. When I finally did, it contained no plea for forgiveness. Just a list of every lie he remembered telling, every document he had touched, every person he had helped hurt, and the sentence, I am trying to become someone who would have warned you sooner. I folded it and placed it in a file. Not forgiven. Not forgotten. Documented. Myra received 9 years. Lowell received 12. Paul received 4. Devin received probation, community service, and the permanent discomfort of being alive in the truth. Some people online said the sentences were too light. Some said too harsh. Everyone became a judge, once the pain was safely not theirs. On the anniversary, we held no gala. We held an open audit in the lobby. There were folding chairs, coffee urns, hospital social workers, families, donors, reporters, and a projector showing every dollar received and every dollar spent. No choir. No roses. No children on stage. At the end, June nudged me. Say something. I hate speeches. You hate fake speeches. She had me there. I stood near the donor wall, now replaced with a digital registry anyone could search. A year ago, I said, people with power tried to make my name mean theft. Before that, they made children's names mean revenue. We cannot undo what they did, but we can refuse to rebuild the kind of room where it was easy to do. I looked at the families. If you give here, you don't buy innocence. You accept responsibility. No one clapped at first. Then Aaron did, once, twice. The room followed. It was awkward, uneven, human. The best sound I had heard in years. I kept one tape private. Not because it lacked evidence, because it had too much of me in it. It was the recording June made the night after the article destroyed my name, when I came to her motel claiming I only needed copies of her calls. I had forgotten she was recording everything then. Trauma makes memory a hallway with missing lights. On the tape, I sounded nothing like the woman people later clipped into justice edits. I sounded small. I don't know how to survive this, I said. June's voice answered, tired but steady. Then don't survive the whole thing tonight. Survive 10 minutes. What if they win? Then we make them win loudly. There was a rustle, Lily murmuring in sleep. A truck passing outside. Then my voice again. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. June said, everyone is not in this room. I listened to that tape. On the morning Harbor Witness Fund opened its second family housing grant. Outside my office, Annika was arguing with a hospital accountant. June was teaching Lily not to put stickers on official forms. Aaron was assembling a shelf badly and refusing help. The lobby smelled like coffee instead of lilies. My name had been mostly repaired in public. Mostly. There would always be search results, screenshots, people who read the accusation but never the truth. That used to make me furious. Now it made me careful. A reputation is not a soul. Losing one can feel like death because the world treats it like proof you existed correctly. But the people who matter are not the ones who hear your name. They are the ones who stay in the room when your name becomes dangerous. Myra wrote to me once from prison. The letter was 6 pages of perfume and poison. She apologized for the pain surrounding me, never for the pain she caused. She said women like us were punished for ambition. She said Lowell had manipulated us both. She said she hoped one day I would understand that leadership requires moral compromise. I sent it to the case archive without replying. Lowell never wrote. Men like him consider silence dignity when it is merely the last luxury left. Devon sent updates through his probation officer for a while, then stopped. I hope that means he found a life where truth costs less. I hope nothing more. Hope, too, needs boundaries. On the second anniversary of the gala, June asked if I ever felt satisfied. We were sitting outside the hospital while Lily attended a follow-up appointment, watching rain turn the sidewalk silver. No, I said after thinking about it. June nodded like she expected that. But I feel clear. That might be better. Maybe it was. Revenge stories usually end when the villains fall. People like that because falling is visible. Cameras can capture it. Audiences can cheer. But justice is what happens after the fall, when someone has to sweep glass, read contracts, answer phones, rebuild trust one documented dollar at a time. It is slower than revenge. Less cinematic, more honest. That night, I opened the last tape again. Everyone is not in this room. I saved a copy to the archive under a private label. Beginning. Then I turned off the light, locked the office, and walked through the lobby where no child's face hung larger than their consent, where no donor's name shone brighter than the truth, where the walls were plain and the records were open. Outside, the city was wet, loud, alive. My phone buzzed with a message from June. Lily says your knock-knock jokes are still illegal. For the first time in a long time, I laughed before checking who might hear it. They had tried to bury me beneath a story they wrote themselves. But they forgot one thing about buried things. Some become evidence, some become roots.